okay, I'll give Disney a little bit of credit. They waited at least 10 years after their last live-action remake disaster thing before they tried again. Problem is, whereas that one actually had a decent start, this one immediately starts out at the bottom of the trash bin. And yet, somehow, someway, it began a trend because Disney is milking the nostalgia of their own fans. Because I cannot tell you how many people have been blinded to the obvious reality of the situation here. Mostly Disney shills that will just not even try to raise a finger at them because of like a sponsorship or blinded by nostalgia or wearing rose-colored glasses, however you want to put it. Thankfully, I'm not one of those people. Hence this marathon where I'm tearing them apart for all their stupid decisions, and to show you all just how pointless, dumb, and outright agitating this whole remake trend is with Disney. Now, yes, I have been known to like a couple remakes. Like, as I said earlier, Maleficent is one I do like, even though it's not really a remake, but it still kind of counts, even if it's its own weird thing. We'll talk about it when we get there. And heck, even horror has a few decent remakes. Like, I like the 2012 remake of Silent Night. I really like the '09 remake of Friday the 13th. And I really like the 2018 Halloween, despite the fact that Kills and Ends immediately dove that timeline off of a cliff. So what's Disney's excuse? None. They have no excuse outside of their own lazy, insipid, cash-grabbing corporateness. So, let's dive into this wonderland and see how it all went so horribly wrong. What's up? What's happening? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Animation Station, your wishes for anything and everything animation, including a company that is a shell of its former self, as well as TV and movies. I am your host, Jackson Small. Welcome back to Disney-Vember 3 Corporate Calamity. Welcome to the absolute disaster that is Alice in Wonderland 2010. Coincidentally, this came out the exact same year as that god-awful Nightmare on Elm Street remake. Yeah, that's a real encouraging sign. So, okay. This one wanted to take the source material of the book and actually tried to adapt the darker subject material of the book, while also staying somewhat faithful to the original version. I don't know, it's a weird hodgepodge mess, but I can't say that it's not without merit, because, yeah, this movie does suck, and it is one of the most boring things I've ever watched in my life, but at the same time, there's a part of me that has this sick kind of respect for it. I don't know, maybe it's because I like Tim Burton. Yes, he's made a lot of bad movies, but he's made some really great ones too. And even some that I'm not a big fan of, like Beetlejuice, I can see the creativity in his vision. So, unfortunately, this is one of those times where, unfortunately, even Tim couldn't save it, because either there was some kind of corporate meddling behind the scenes from Disney themselves, or Tim went a little too outlandish, which does happen sometimes. I don't know what the real story is to result in such a boring snooze fest of a film that is absolutely a slap in the face to the original and even its own source material in its own freaking way. But also how it all sounded decent on paper, and yet all went so horribly wrong. So, I think I've done enough of a preamble, because we're now over 4 minutes in, so without further ado or delay, here's my long, lengthy, rant-filled review for this sorry excuse of a remake of Alice in Wonderland. Enjoy. With the Dalmatian duology done, we officially descend into the never-ending hellscape of all the modern cash-grabbing garbage bags that continuously get shoved down our throats to this day. And this one is even lucky enough to come with a side of bitter expired NyQuil, so you'll sleep more than you'll suffer. That's the one thing I can say about this that I can't say about some of the other remakes. It is literally so boring that I wouldn't be surprised if it puts children to sleep. Now, to be fair, I wasn't against the concept of an Alice in Wonderland reimagining with a darker tone. Because the book that the original animated film adapted from itself was pretty damn dark to begin with. It was a grim fairy tale. And for all his faults, Tim Burton is a talented visionary who's made plenty of enjoyable dark fantasies like Nightmare Before Christmas, Corpse Bride, and Edward Scissorhands, to name a few. And as I already stated earlier, Beetlejuice, even if it's not my particular thing, I saw the creativity in his vision. But for whatever reason, whether it was studio interference or Tim not understanding the actual material he was working with, it all went very wrong in so many ways. The story is a complete jumbled, cluttered mess, lost in its own confusing ambition. Acting from everyone is terrible, as they all give zero life or energy to their performances whatsoever, which, considering the big name cast behind this movie, is absolutely unacceptable. Especially Johnny Depp, a Tim Burton regular, as Mad Hatter, which is legendarily bad miscasting. I'm not against Depp in this role, and he's usually good at making these darker, tragic characters. I mean, look at Edward Scissorhands, that's one of his best roles. But, my goodness, he was just awful as Mad Hatter. There's no ifs, ands, or buts around it. It is an awful performance. One of his worst in recent memory. Effects are some of the worst CGI this company has ever dumped out, ranging from Red Queen having a big head for no discernible reason. Why in the hell did you think it was a great idea to give a giant head to the Red Queen, played by Helen Bonham Carter, another Tim Burton regular? Like, what was the actual purpose of giving her a big head? Is it just to make sure that she's different from the White Queen? Like, what was the purpose there? 2, the Tweedles looking like demented serial killers that are going to murder the main protagonist and give people nightmares. The Tweedles are some of the most horrific, terrifying things I've ever seen in anything. And it's not like it's supposed to be scary, no. Like, in a way where it looks so uncanny valley that it literally seeps into your soul and haunts your nightmares as soon as you close your eyes. Like, it is that really, really bad CGI that was plagued all throughout most 2000s and 90s movies. Now, I'll give it some credit, at least unlike the original Tron, I can actually look at it without my eyes wanting to bleed, but, I mean, what kind of trade-off is that? I mean, eyes won't bleed, but you'll have nightmares, and you'll feel like you're gonna get murdered in your sleep later. What kind of trade-off is that? Seriously, make that make sense. Writing is an absolute joke, as it tries to be as wide as an ocean with this big, sprawling premise, with dialogue no deeper than a puddle on the side of the road. Runtime is beyond obnoxiously self-indulgent, at over 100 minutes long. Why in the ever-loving hell does Disney think it's a good idea to keep making these remakes so needlessly long? Most of them longer than their own original animations. Self-indulgence, obnoxiousness, who the hell knows? Pacing is horrendous, moving slower than a snail, and simultaneously feeling like two very different movies smashed together haphazardly. Like, you have one movie that's trying to kinda sorta be a remake, adaptation, whatever, of Alice in Wonderland, and then you have another movie that throws in this weird, half-assed Joan of Arc storyline here for no reason. Yeah, these two do not go together if you can't catch my drift. Cinematography is so flat and devoid of life. Like, it is one of the most colorless, bland, just ugly-looking films that I've seen in a hot minute. Like, it is so ugly and devoid of any kind of joy whatsoever. Which, again, contrasts to the original animation, which is bright and colorful and full of creativity. This movie's so hard to talk about. Rewatchability is non-existent. I never want to watch this boring crap ever again. The ultimate main antagonist is a cheap out of nowhere resolution that makes no sense because, again, these two storylines do not go together. Messages and morals that are bashed into your skull in the most bland and generic way possible. The tone is all kinds of out of whack, and not in a good way, and all the characters are generic blocks of wood that somehow make mushrooms look more interesting. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the people that actually like this movie like it because they can get high while watching it. I don't know. However, turning Wonderland into a barren, war-torn wasteland was a solid idea. Yeah, it's horribly executed, but on paper, not a bad idea, because again, the book that this is adapting from was already very, very dark, but at the same time, it doesn't work because nothing else surrounding that Wonderland is able to actually make us care about this Wonderland. I guess you can call it Wanderland instead, since all the plot wants to do is wander aimlessly. It doesn't outright redo the original beat for beat the entire way through, so it's at least better than that god-awful Lion King remake that we have to review later. So I'll give it that much. And while the execution was nowhere close to even acceptable, I do give credit to Burton for trying to make it more distinct by trying new things rather than copying one for one off the original animation and keeping it within his own style. I can give credit to Burton for that. You can tell that he did try to craft something interesting here. I'll also say that the music is okay. Sounding cinematic, yet full of mystery by having a tone that's just very slightly off. Again, does not hold a candle to the original animation, but as its own thing, the music's okay. But sadly, the film itself fails to match any of that subtle unease. In fact, that's one of this movie's biggest problems. No subtlety. None of that subtle creepiness that made the book, and even the original animation in some ways, so interesting. This is just so up-in-your-face dark that it becomes bland. Overall, this is a colossal disaster, and even 15 years later, yeah, that's how long we've been suffering with these god-awful remakes, it's still one of the most relentlessly boring movies I've ever seen. Not one of the worst I've ever seen, but one of the most boring. It's baffling how this started any trends at all, because I'm sure even most kids would be bored being subjected to this lifeless dreck. Then again, the kids flock to the theater to see Snowshite and that pointless, stupid as hell Lilo and Shite remake, so what do I know? Not to mention parents being blinded by nostalgia and not realizing they're getting ripped off constantly. Off with its head, as the Red Queen would say, the real Red Queen would say, because this snoozer sure as hell isn't worth anybody's time. But because Disney are such predatory, out-of-touch idiots, desperate for money by any means necessary, the worst was still yet to come. For Burton, for the Disney live-action remakes that should not have become a trend in the first place, and for the Alice franchise, because somehow, this is not the last time we have to deal with this sorry-ass excuse of a Wonderland. And that's it. That's literally all. That's all I can say about this without going into spoilers. And even then, I can't really go much into what spoilers because the movie has no damn plot that's discernible under all of this cluttered mess. Burton, I give you credit for trying to make it different, but whether it was studio interference or you not understanding the source material, it's too different. It doesn't even make sense to be called a remake, outside of the characters and the name. Like, even people that don't like that original 98 remake, they can at least have one enjoyable performance, Glenn Close as Cruella de Vil. This has nothing enjoyable outside of the music, and even then, the music is just mediocre. So with all that said, my final verdict for the 2010 remake of Alice in Wonderland, that I'm not going to call Alice in Wonderland for the grand majority of the rest of this marathon, is a 3 out of 10. It's a bad movie, it's a boring movie, and it's such a pain to sit through. And again, why the hell is it 2 hours long? And why did you try to put 2 different movies together into one script? It's filmmaking 101, man. Like, how do you mess that up? Then again, for all I know, it's not even Burton's fault. It's just Disney being corporate a-holes and completely and utterly screwing with his vision. And if that's the case, screw you for not giving him creative freedom to actually do what he should do. But if it's the case of Tim not understanding the source material, it's still Disney's fault. Because if even he didn't understand this source material, I mean, at that point, get a different director and try a different vision. But these lazy clowns just refuse to actually try. And unfortunately, it's only going to get worse and worse as we go through these piles of absolute dreck. So, yeah, needless to say, this is a really bad start as we jump down the rabbit hole straight into the hellscape of modern laziness. That's all I've got for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry that this review was very angry. Sorry that this marathon is mostly very angry, but I warned you right up front that it was going to be. So, if you're still here, I appreciate you. And if you are skipping these because they're so suffocatingly negative, I understand and I don't hold it against you. But since this is my last year, even talking about this sorry excuse of a company, I wanted to make it as spiteful and hateful as possible. So, that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. What's next? Oh. Next is a movie that I'm probably going to get absolutely crucified for saying that I actually like. Because the next one is a textbook definition of a fun, guilty pleasure movie. It's a movie that I have a soft spot for. It's a movie I've watched a lot when I was a kid, and I still watch it now. And it's a movie that, yeah, it's not really a good movie per se, but it's at least entertaining. I can give it that. I'll see you next time for the very weird, but also very hilariously goofy remake of The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Starring Nicolas Cage and Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon. Yeah, we have a bit to talk about next time. See you then.
I'm excited for what comes up ahead. Hey.